The first step in this lesson is to load an existing C# app project into the Visual Studio IDE so that we can then execute that project and test it. Now you can see here that I've gone ahead and extracted the examples associated with these live lessons videos to my C drive's examples folder, and within there there's a ch01 folder which has the code for lesson 1. Now within that subfolder there are two additional subfolders, Win7 test drive and Win8 test drive. The app in the Win7 test drive folder is geared to the Visual Studio Express 2012 for Windows Desktop IDE running on either Windows 7 or Windows 8. The Win8 test drive folder contains a different version of the app that is only capable of executing in Windows 8 using the new Windows 8 user interface. So for the purpose of this lesson, we'll be using the version of the app in the Win7 test drive subfolder. And again, if you haven't looked at the before you begin lesson yet, you'll want to take a look at that lesson to get the URL for downloading the examples, the examples should also be available from wherever you're watching these videos or wherever you downloaded these videos. Now within the Win7 test drive folder, I have a Painter subfolder which is my project, contains my project I should say, and within that you'll see there's a file called painter.sln, and this is going to help you load all of the files associated with your project into the Visual Studio IDE. So you can simply double click that file to load it up. And here you can see my Visual Studio Express 2012 for Windows Desktop got loaded. If you don't have the Express version of the software installed on your computer, but rather a full version of Visual Studio, double-clicking that solution file should also load the project into the full version of Visual Studio. Now, within Visual Studio, of course, you have various different areas that you can see here, menus, toolbars, etc. We're going to be talking about all those different features more starting in the next lesson. For the purpose of this lesson, the key piece is the Solution Explorer, which contains the solution we just loaded. A solution is typically a group of one or more projects that make up an application. In our case, we have, in most cases actually for our examples, we have one project per solution. There will be some number of examples where we have two or more projects in a given solution. For example, one of our database sets of examples has a bunch of different projects in one solution so that we can easily share code amongst those projects. But for the most part, each of our solutions will typically have one project in it, and the project is the node underneath solution, and within the project node are all the different files associated with your project. Now, as far as executing an existing app, all you need to do is one of a couple of things. You can either click the Start button right here on the toolbar, and that button is actually the equivalent of going to the Debug menu and selecting Start Debugging, or simply pressing the F5 shortcut key. You can also use Start Without Debugging, and Start Debugging is typically used when you want to test an app and you want specifically to be able to step through the code of your app using the debugging tools. When you're executing a Windows app, one that has a graphical user interface, and you're not doing any debugging with breakpoints, then both of these options, Start Debugging and Start Without Debugging, will appear to have the same effect. When you start getting into the subsequent lessons where we do console applications that are just text input-output from a Windows command prompt, in that case you'll often want to use Start Without Debugging, at least initially, because that will keep the command prompt window on the screen until you have a chance to study the output of the program, and then you can dismiss that window when you're ready. If you use Start Debugging with a console app, what will happen is as soon as the app finishes is executing, the console window, the command prompt window, will simply be dismissed. So in my case, what I'm going to do here is just click the Start button. This is a windowed app that has its own window that it executes in. It's a simple painter app, and this particular app was implemented using Windows Presentation Foundation, which is one of 3 different sets of GUI capabilities you now have available to you. The original set of GUI capabilities is known as Windows Forms, and we do have 2 lessons on Windows Forms app development that you'll encounter later. That is the so-called legacy technology of Windows graphical user interfaces. It's been around for a very long time, and most new development should be done using the newer GUI capabilities. This particular app was created with Windows Presentation Foundation, which was introduced several years ago, and Windows Presentation Foundation gives you a lot more flexibility than Windows Forms does in terms of customizing the look and feel of your graphical user interfaces. And then the third technology, which was introduced specifically for the purpose of Windows 8, is the so-called Windows 8 UI, and apps that are built with Windows 8 UI can execute only in Windows 8, in the version of Windows 8 that's optimized for touch screens and the new Windows 8 desktop. Now, this particular app is just a simple drawing app. Like I said, you have some radio buttons for selecting a color and some radio buttons for selecting a size of your brush. And basically the way this works is the slower you drag, the more contiguous a line you'll get. The faster you drag, you'll wind up with spaces in between, and one of the reasons for that is the sampling rate that the operating system uses for detecting the mouse's location on the screen. If you drag really fast, the sampling rate doesn't change to based on the fact that you're dragging faster. It still samples the position of the mouse at the same rate, so you often will wind up with gaps between the dots in this program. However, when you drag slower, then you get a contiguous line. And you can see we've also provided a couple of buttons here. The undo button will remove one of these dots at a time in the reverse order from which we created them. So you can see as I rapidly click here that only one circle at a time is going away. And I can also clear the app entirely by clicking the clear button, which just deletes all of the little circles I drew from the collection that's storing them behind the scenes of this app. And I'm not a very good drawer, but let's say I just wanted to write the word welcome here in red and small, so I'll just go ahead and give a shot at that. My little kid-style drawing here, since it's hard to, whoa, I can't even spell. Let's clear that and try one more time. I spell like my son. There we go. As you can see, it's a little difficult to control the drawing with just a mouse. It would be a lot easier to do this perhaps with a touch screen device, which I don't unfortunately have accessible to me. So that's our simple painter app. And again, the key things that you saw here were how to load an existing project into Visual Studio. We started to talk about the Solution Explorer, which allows you to see all the different files in your solution, and you saw how to execute an app in Visual Studio as well. In the next lesson, we'll start getting into a little bit of GUI development. We'll create a simple app that contains just some text and an image, and at that point we'll start to talk a little bit more about the various components within the Visual Studio IDE, and then as we need various features throughout the IDE in subsequent lessons, we'll present those features.